All right, the Last Dance finale edition. Me and Tyler are gonna break it down what we saw 1 through 10. What did you think as a whole? I guess the review as a whole from the whole 10-part episode.
Wasn't sure what to expect from this whole ordeal, but absolutely freaking loved it. Good luck to any documentary after this. It came at the perfect time with this pandemic, as everybody's talked about. They decided to release it earlier. I mean, this was supposed to come out during the NBA Finals,
Right.
but of course, as of right now, we don't have an NBA Finals. We may have one in a couple months, but who knows? But I thought it was phenomenal. It was a look to an era that was so beloved and so revered of these larger than life stars of not just Jordan and Pippen, but Patrick Ewing and Larry Bird and Reggie Miller, Karl Malone, Rodman, all of these guys that are so revered in sports conversations. And we got to see that behind the scenes. We got to hear these amazing stories. Some of them we already heard, but then were magnified even more with some details thrown in there. And I think there were a lot of things about like Bulls management and within those seasons that we did not know about. I mean, the Jerry Krause stuff we're going to jump right into in the first 2 episodes, but I think the Jerry Krause stuff might have got overlooked in the 90s if you go back and look at that stuff. He was a big proponent of not only putting that team together, but also the fall of the Chicago Bulls in the 90s.
So, saying that, like you said, it's going to be hard for anybody to reproduce such a thing. If there was one you could see, what would it be going back? Who would you like to see? What team, what era, what athletes, what franchise? What's the one?
We talked about this via text, Rano, and the first one that jumps out is Tiger Woods. And unfortunately, it's for a lot of the bad stuff, not just the comeback. The comeback is obviously positive, but that week of Thanksgiving where him and his ex-wife get into it and we hear the story about the golf clubs and her, lashing out, and we hear the stories of him and his infidelity. We all want to know more of that. We love a car crash, whether it be sports or pop culture. We all want that juice, I actually kind of like the story of the 99 to 2004 Lakers, Kobe and Shaq, and how they coexist, the characters on that team, Phil Jackson taking a break, coming back, Derek Fisher, Rick Fox. You had some very interesting guys on that team. And then, of course, you had Mitch Kupchak. He was a very interesting guy in that era and not well-liked before that whole thing got jumped off. 99 to 2004 Lakers for me also because I was a huge Kobe guy, and that was like the first basketball I remember watching was the 93 finals with the Bulls and Suns. And then I was locked in for that entire Bulls era. But when I actually was able to figure out basketball and realize how amazing these athletes were, it was Kobe and Shaq and those Lakers, and I was completely locked in and dialed in. I would also like to see maybe something on the Patriots, but we'll never see it. We'll never see Bill Belichick and Tom Brady reveal. We'll never know that story. We never will. But I would love to see this last year of Brady and Belichick splitting apart, the conversations that took place. I mean, there's a ton we could go into, but what did you have in mind?
Well, I mean, I would go back 86 Mets, or Doc Gooden being 21, cocaine and, the whole nine. Dale Strawberry and his tumultuous career, then Lenny Dykstra, who's still in the mainstream now as I don't know what he is, a sideshow boxer or, Howard Stern show extra or whatever he is. But how that locker room, him and, Keith Hernandez and Gary Carter, those guys, the 2004 Boston Red Sox would be an interesting one too because they were so wild. The Johnny Damons, Kevin Youkilis, Big Papi, everything like that in that locker room, getting drunk every night and somehow waking up the next morning and winning baseball game. I think it'd be unique. But like you said, none of these will come out, especially the later ones. Tiger Woods has plenty of money. There's no money you can throw at him to find out what happened exactly that night. He'll never need to sit down and do a memoir. Same with Tom Brady. He's pretty tight to the vest anyway about what goes on in his life. So you'll never know any of that stuff. But I see they're coming out with the Sosa McGuire, the Lance Armstrong. those should be interesting. I mean, anything that's autobiographical that gives you something that you didn't know at face value should be interesting. I don't know how in depth they'll get with Sosa and McGuire and steroids and what they were actually doing, but
Yeah.
I think Lance Armstrong probably will lean a lot that way because he was taking drugs the whole time, or whatever. So those will be interesting.
I agree 100% on Lance. I think we're going to get the tell-all. But with the summer of '98, I'm not so sure. I mean, with Sammy Sosa and Mark McGuire, I mean, they went to court and they denied their wrongdoings. They blatantly lied, as we all know. But the summer of '98 was so interesting to me because that saved baseball in a lot of different ways. It was pretty much in the doldrums and dead. And if you think about the summer of '98, it kicked off all these amazing storylines in baseball, from Barry Bonds to, like, a year later, Derek Jeter had an amazing, like, '99, 2000. And you go into the Red Sox and their amazing run in 2004 and '07. So that really, like, got people ignited and excited about baseball again. And of course, we saw obviously help due to steroids, but summer of '98 really kicked off some great baseball.
Really did. All right, well, let's get into it. We'll get into episode 1 is pretty much Jerry Krause is shown to be villain right off the bat. How he wanted a little more star power than he got. He wanted to be an organization that got all the credit, not just MJ, Scottie Pippen, Phil Jackson, and the like. It goes through. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Jordan becoming Michael Jordan instead of Mike Jordan, beating Georgetown. And then, Bobby Knight saying he's the best player he's ever seen, even before so. So what's your take on Krause at episode 1, not, episode 10, but initially?
I'm not sure if they meant to do it this way, but immediately he was villainized. Immediately he was the guy that, he didn't pay Pippen, and he told Phil Jackson, this is your last year. Regardless if you go 82-0, this is it. We're moving on. We're rebuilding. And it put a black not only over Jerry Krause, but that entire season about what's going to happen afterwards. In terms of the rise of Jordan, that was great to see because that was before my time. I was born in the early '80s, so while Jordan was making big-time plays in college, I was a baby. I had no idea. For you, though, Rano, you have been somewhat critical of Jordan in his college, and we'll talk about his early NBA years, because Jordan was not Jordan in his first 3-4 years in the NBA. And you've been critical of that. But you go back and look at Jordan's college years, he had that big shot in the NCAA championship and had some big games in the postseason. But they really tried to tell a story that he was breaking out, that he wasn't Jordan yet, that he was breaking out. Do you think they accurately told that story?
I think it's right. I think the thing about Dean Smith was he never let anybody really be a superstar. Even when he had Vince Carter and Haywood, Stackhouse, and Wallace, if you looked at their line score, you didn't really see superstar like you see now with 30, 10, and 10. You'd see 15, 6, and 7 or something like that. Yeah, he is balanced, and he never – if they were up by 10 or 15 a few minutes to go, you're not playing anymore where, Len Bias was shortly after that. And I think he was a more thought of future star. People can look back now and say, yeah, I knew Jordan was going to be this. But that's the same thing you could say for Ryan Lee, for Jamarcus Russell, or, Marcus Camby, or anybody look really good. You never know who's going to be the next Jordan. Just like what they're talking about Zion. I don't think Zion can ever be what Jordan and LeBron in a 5-tool way. He may be great and he may be dominant, but, being Kevin Garnett or being Tim Duncan's still pretty good. So, yeah, Jordan wasn't that. Around here, the South Carolina / North Carolina fans, a lot of those might say, we knew Jordan was going to be good, but I don't think anybody – because Worthy was really good and Sam Perkins was really good on that team too. And you think about it, he went third. He wasn't LeBron.
Not on a national level.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Bowie went ahead of him. So, I mean, there's something there. If he was LeBron James, nobody's going ahead of – and I'm not trying to compare it to it. I'm glad they didn't bring that in because it's not necessary. But I'm saying a surefire, can't-miss kid
Ugh.
that they wouldn't have took two guys ahead of him. So yeah, I mean, Krause was made the villain, but I'm glad, through the story we get to see it wasn't necessarily being a villain all the time, because he is the one who did slide up and take Scottie Pippen, a little known kid at the fifth pick on draft day, which I think that's overlooked.
One of the biggest lines, it was just this one line that jumped out to me, and I think we talked about it via text. He went from a Chicago White Sox baseball scout. Has that ever happened, like, before or after? Like, has that happened in the last 30 years?
He must have did something to impress Reinsdorf. I mean, something.
Yeah, that's bizarre to me.
And become the GM of the greatest dynasty we've seen, in our
Mhm.
lifetime. So,
Yeah.
that's wild. Episode 2 starts off with Pippen, gives the background, the poverty, the, two people injured in his house, I guess paralyzed or whatever the case. It also gives the negativity of him, saying he's not going to give up his summer on the ankle injury.
Yeah.
It shows Oakley slapping him as a rookie. It's mainly focused around what Pippen did and didn't do, and there's more to come. But growing 6 inches his freshman year or whatever. I guess he started in college as like the trainer. He was probably like the 15th guy, and then he brings him in, and next thing you know, he has a 6-inch growth spurt, and he becomes the 5th pick overall for Seattle. And then on draft day, Krause makes a great move to jump up and take him. And really, we don't know. We can't say one way or the other how the history goes down if Pippen doesn't get drafted, because Jordan didn't go on to win any without Pippen before or after. Pippen didn't win without him. So, that's probably the biggest move in this whole series is drafting Scottie Pippen. And I know a lot of people, their arguments have changed depending on what they're trying to say. But Pippen's a big cog in this whole machine.
Scottie had the most interesting character arc of the entire documentary, in my opinion. It started off with his origin story, but there was that line where he talked about the injury before the season and saying, I wasn't going to have the surgery and ruin my summer in rehab. And the shock that we all had, we're like, can you imagine if LeBron James said that in 2020? He would get crucified, absolutely crucified at the stake. LeBron is already crucified. Half the time he doesn't say anything wrong. But imagine if he said something like that, because he was a great player. He was an all-star. I mean, you take Jordan off the Bulls, and that team still made a run in the postseason, even though they had some injuries and whatnot. But he was a star, and he had a couple of interesting story arcs throughout the documentary. We'll get to it later. I love how his story ended, where he had the back injury and he was just used as a decoy. He couldn't do anything, but he went back and helped his team to be a decoy. And of course, there were some other things that happened that we'll get into with the whole sitting out for not getting the final shot, not getting the play drawn up in the final shot. I think that was coached. But yeah, Pippen, very interesting story. I was really glad to see that they kind of dove into that.
Yeah, and it was also the first introduction we saw to his dad, and what a tight knit, like more like a friend and a father. His dad, and I think his dad. I don't know how to say this, but I think once Jordan became Jordan, his dad, kind of strutted around like some of the stereotypical things we see on TV, like, driving the Lexus, saying hey to the ladies, wearing the suit. Probably no matter what he wore, he always had a pair of Jordans on that probably didn't match the suit. But I can see him not being loud mouth, but loud, personality. You can tell when Jordan's dad walked in the room, and also had a little interaction with Roy Williams and Dean Smith about how good he was, at UNC, which I think, like I said, I think you could say that about a lot of guys, because no matter what Roy will say now, you just don't know that he's going to be the best there ever was. There's, Magic and Bird and Ewing, and, there's a lot of guys in that era all the way up that could have been that guy, but Jordan ends up taking it from there. So, we introduced to a lot of things there, from Pippen, Jordan, backstory, family, college. And then episode 3, we get into Rodzilla. We get into the piece that doesn't look like it's gonna fit. That really you don't want to put into a well-oiled machine, but instead of it backfiring, it turns into a nitro button. Excuse the pun, but a nitro to go forward. Rodman gets kicked out of his house at 18. He goes and bangs around at some junior college. Next thing you know, he's one of the main cogs of the bad boys. And he says in this episode, he liked to get physical. He wanted to get hurt. He wanted to get cut. He wanted to beat on somebody. And he got drafted by the perfect team for that. Because, Lambier's throwing punches, Mahorn, and even the little guys like Benny Johnson and Isaiah Thomas are mixing it up, John Sally. So it shows that part. What did you think? What is your take on Rodman? Of course, that's my guy. But, I mean, as far as, I guess, going to the Bulls.
Rodman came in at the perfect time, didn't he? I mean, imagine if Rodman came in like now. If Rodman came in the last 5 years, I don't think he has the career that he has because of the style of the NBA, the style that he has, because of his outlandish nature. I mean, Rodman, we knew a lot about already going in just because he'll tell you. I mean, he's one of the most open, honest guys there is. If you ask a question, he's going to give you the answer. He's not going to shy away from it. He didn't give a damn, and that's why you love him. That's why a lot of people just enjoy his personality. Fascinating guy. I enjoyed it. The fact that he was put into a team that fit his skill set, and the way they told the story. Can we jump into this real quick? The way they told the story on this documentary, there were so many people on Twitter that claim they were confused on the timeline. Ridiculous. This documentary was perfectly sculpted to where they were introducing characters. They were looking at the years leading up to The Last Dance. They were looking at the 98 season, then going back and looking at 92, 93, 94, the baseball year, 96, 97, 98. It was perfectly told. And for Rodman, they looked at those Piston years, and then they also looked at how is he going to help this Bulls team in the 98 season, because it was all leading up to that 98 season. They were setting the table, how Phil makes an impact, how Rodman makes an impact, Pippen, Jordan, how all of these characters, and Kukoc, and I guess you had Kerr as well. Kerr plays a role later on. He has that amazing 10-minute segment in the final episode, which was just beautiful. But we'll get to that later as well. But no, I loved how Rodman's fantastic. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Rodman just because he's a lot like you, Rhino, in the sense that you ask a question, he's going to give you a damn answer.
Well, the thing too is, and like you said, the thing going back and forth, that was perfectly done. It was foreshadowed and brought back, and then showing you what happened over and over. That 98 season kept getting brought up, and if you're such a simpleton that you can't follow that, I mean, I can't imagine a person watching that and somehow getting lost. Like, I read the same tweets you're talking about, and I'm like, I mean, how could you? That's the guy who never gets out the corn maze. That just stands there for days, I guess. I mean, it's simple. I mean, plus, the thing about it is if you're our age or older or about our age, even maybe a little bit younger, you experienced it all. So it wasn't brand new. If this was a story about a Madrid soccer team, of course, I probably would have been lost because I don't know what's going on. But this is mainstream news. Jordan's worldwide #1 brand. Rodman's up there, recognizable figure. And then Pippen and the Bulls for that 90s stretch was the #1 franchise in the world. Soccer hadn't even hit the boom that it is now. So, at that point, Dream Team and Bulls was, worldwide. And to get lost in that or complain about you getting lost in that, it was ridiculous. It was so well done. I mean, and I love old sports documentaries, and that's what I watch probably more movies of that than anything else. And this is better than anything I've seen. And even though I knew 90% of what happened, just waiting to find that 10% that I didn't. In that same,
it was people bitching just to bitch.
Yeah, in that same episode, we see his first, I guess, smart ass comment where Elo, he sees that Elo's covering him, and he says that's a mistake. That's his first jab at '90s, late '80s, early '90s basketball. That's a mistake, and he makes that shot that we've seen on McDonald's and Gatorade and Coke and everything, Nike commercials. That one shot, and and then of course Ron Harper comes out and says he should have been on him, but then we see 3 episodes later he burns Ron Harper 2 off the screen. So I don't think you can stop Jordan at that point. Elo covered him as good as you possibly could. The funny thing was, after that, before the final game, he went to each reporter who had them losing, Chicago beat writers who had picked Chicago to lose to Cleveland, and he said, "I got you. We got you last night, and I'm gonna get you tonight." And it was funny that he calls out. He has enough rapport with those guys that is playful, but he still is not afraid to call out the media, which most guys aren't going to do that.
At the end of the day, it was called The Last Dance, but this documentary was about Michael Jordan. We've never seen so much coverage, so much comments, so much attention paid on Jordan for a long period of time like this. This was about him.
Right.
And you brought up something about in episode 3, he starts kind of taking shots at guys, and there's that competitive nature with the media and the playful nature too. His character arc is building as we've never seen, and I don't think we ever will, a guy as competitive as him paired with his talent, paired also with his just absolute desire to kill, absolute assassin's desire to just destroy you in every way. I mean, the story about Jerry Sloan, it was George Carl, where he saw him in a restaurant and he didn't say anything to him and said, "Oh, that's all the motivation I need." He finds something to drive him. I love the story. I think it was in episode 4, which I guess we're on now, episode 4 or 5, where he's getting beat by the Pistons. He's getting beat by the Celtics in those early rounds. And he decides, you know what? I need to be stronger because they're kicking my ass in the playoffs. He starts lifting weights, puts on 15 pounds of muscle, and he's the Jordan we all know now. He knew what he needed to do, and he did it. This is just awesome.
Like you said, episode 4 is pretty much a spotlight on Phil Jackson. It goes back to it shows him being a bench coach, but then it goes back when he was coaching to Puerto Rico, his fire, how he played. He was a Dennis Rodman type. He was a bruiser. He was a rebounder. He was a defensive player. Hippie / Native American / Zen. He was a worldly type person, I guess. He would probably be the guy at Woodstock, instead of being in Las Vegas like Jordan or Rodman. He would be at Woodstock smoking weed or hitting acid or whatever. But it showed, I think the best part it showed of him, and this is what I believe this in any coaching, is you don't have to coach all the time. Like the week before the finals with the Jazz, instead, most coaches would be in there running plays and shooting free throws and watching film, and he gives the guys a day off and they reset. Of course, Rodman took his own time to reset as much as possible, but to understand that Michael Jordan's made 1 million layups and 5 million free throws and how many ever jumpers, and they've run a pick and roll and they run the triangle. No, you don't need 7 straight days of that to win. He lets the guys go off and reset. He was probably resetting himself, and then they come back and do work. And then at the end of that, we see, like you talked about, he knew what he needed to do, put on 15 pounds of muscle. They finally beat the Pistons. And then in doing that, the Pistons walk off the court without giving them, dap up or, whatever, congratulations, 7 seconds to go. And that pretty much lights a fuse of hatred between him and Isaiah that's still there today, I guess.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because I don't think we've talked about this, and I'm really curious of your opinion. Isaiah says that it happened to the Pistons with the Celtics.
Right.
The Celtics chose to walk off the court, not shake hands. Now, I know we will never be on that level in terms of professional athletes on that stage, but you're just taught from an early level of sportsmanship. In Little League Baseball, you're getting on the field and you're shaking hands. High school, you're shaking hands. College, you're shaking hands. And in the pros, there's just this bitterness, I guess it's competitive. I'm trying to understand it, but I thought that was wrong. I thought the way the Pistons handled that was completely wrong. Let's be honest, what the Celtics did were wrong. What was your take on all of that? And they knocked off.
I lost you there for a second. You say, what was my take on the Pistons walking off the court?
Yeah, what was your
well?
Yeah, what was your take on all that?
I don't know. You probably, they've eliminated the Bulls the last couple seasons, and they probably just felt like, it's over. They knew it was over. Their run was over. And I don't really know. I mean, when a baseball team wins the World Series, one team goes on the field and the other team leaves. They don't really congratulate each other. And in certain times, and in football, some do and then some don't. Some go to the locker room. I don't know. I mean, it's a sportsmanship thing to do, but I don't know why Michael Jordan felt offended by it. I wouldn't feel offended by it because if I win, I don't care what you do. If you tell me, if you can call me later the next day and tell me congratulations, I don't need that reassurance because at that point I'm going to the finals.
They both came off as petty, in my opinion.
Of course. But it's amazing that it still sticks 20 years later, 30 years later. That Jordan, going into the dream team, that, and they say it wasn't Jordan's call, but it was more of a group setting that didn't want him. I mean, Jordan didn't want him on the team, but there was more than just Jordan who didn't want him on the team for that reason. And, I don't know. Obviously, there's something there because they still don't like each other. He made a point to, I respect this game, but I don't like him. And so, all right.
It's clear Jordan had a say, even though he said he didn't. I think so. But it's also clear the rest of the team had a say, too, because there were a couple other guys. Magic said it. Because remember, Magic and Isaiah had a thing in the late 80s, early 90s. They had a little beef that was just recently, cleared up a couple years ago. And Magic said there would have been a different vibe if Isaiah was on the team.
Sure.
So,
Plus, I mean, he played that bad boy style.
I think it was a collective. Yeah.
I mean, he played a bad boy style, and they wasn't in for that. That was going to be such a domination. They didn't have to play the way that Isaiah did. It's interesting, that they still don't like each other. Episode 5, we get to see Kobe, but we don't really see a lot. We see him talk on the intro, and then we see the All-Star game. And there's really not much more about Kobe. He says he's going to show this boy, the game, and he's going to, if he misses so many shots, he wouldn't throw that boy. He kept calling him the Lakers boy, or, he didn't give him respect at the time, but then later on, after the game, he told him anything you ever need. He kind of took him under his wing. Kobe kind of shaped his game after Jordan. So there was a little, if Kobe was still here, we probably got a lot more of, their interactions over the last 15 years. We missed out on that. And I'm sure they didn't want to talk a lot about Kobe just because, to reopen the wound of Kobe's friends, family, the Lakers and all that. But so we got to see that. But ironically, Jordan wins the MVP at that All-Star game, Kobe's first All-Star game, to kind of show up and let him know that I'm still the boss. So that was pretty cool.
It was yet another motivational tool for Jordan to use to win a game, to do something phenomenal. But I did want to say this about Kobe. That's one of the few times that I got emotional watching any sort of documentary, because Kobe was my guy. That's the guy that I grew up with in terms of my generational superstar. But I think in a weird way, Rhino, when Jordan came out and talked at Kobe's funeral, the emotion that he showed and the respect that he showed, not just because he had passed, but Jordan has since come out and said a lot of things about Kobe. There's one comment Jordan made where he said, if me and Kobe met one-on-one, I'm not sure who would win because I'd be going against myself. Kobe took all my moves. And in the documentary, Kobe admits to taking all of Jordan's moves. I'm not here unless he does what he does. Like, there would be no Kobe if there's no Michael Jordan.
Who are the moves?
So I thought there was somewhat of there was a redeeming quality, I think, to some of the Kobe haters of his game, because Kobe went out and said, yeah, I copied Jordan because that was my guy.
I mean, if you're going to copy anybody, why wouldn't you copy the best?
Exactly.
It's not like he went out and copied Terry Porter or somebody. I mean, he copied perennial Hall of Famer or All-Star. This is also when we get introduced to Tony Kukoc, which was a bad look. It was kind of a bad look for Tony Kukoc because they drafted him. He stayed out 2 years. He played in Europe or whatever. And they kind of, I guess, roasted him going into the Dream Team or going to the Olympics and made it clear that he didn't play their style of basketball. And they played a soft European style. And they kind of roughed him up, or intentionally beat them. Which at the end, Tony Kukoc ends up being a big part of the Chicago Bulls. But at the time, he didn't sign. So I guess he was kind of an outcast.
I thought the only thing that came out of that for me was how close-knit Pippen and Jordan were, how close-knit those teammates were that built to the last season of '98, how they were all on the same page. And Kukoc, in a way, kind of getting his welcome to the NBA. This is how it's going to be, kid. When you come in, you're not number one. You might be number one in your country, but when you come to the US of A, you're going to play third, fourth, or even fifth fiddle on that Chicago Bulls team of the 90s.
Yeah, and it also brings up another where he calls out Clyde Drexler. People compared Clyde Drexler to him. He had been drafted a year before against Portland. People say they were kind of the same. And once you threw that out there, he had to go out there and show up Clyde Drexler and put it on him in the finals and, beat Portland and show up Clyde Drexler.
Which, if I could say one thing, and this isn't a knock on the documentary because I think it's near perfect, but if I had to take one thing or maybe two or three, one of the things would be Clyde Drexler actually had a good series when he went up against Jordan. Gary Payton had a good series when he went up against Jordan. It may not have showed it in the documentary, but if you go back to the box scores, I mean, they were still contributing for their teams. It was just the Bulls were that much better. And there were moments where I think if you didn't see those games, you might have thought Jordan completely dominated and shut him out. And I think, Rhino, you would agree that's not what happened.
Not what happened at all. It's not what happened in a lot of these. And actually, it kind of showed, for people who don't know any better, the Bulls were great and a great run. But there was a lot of game sixes and game sevens in here. There was a lot of pivotal games that a shot goes one way or the other. Instead of being up, 2-0, you're down 2-1, or you're 3-1 on the road. There was a lot of shots and a lot of plays with minutes to go. And most of them were Jordan. Some of them were Kerr. Kukoc had his share, and Pippen did as well. But there was a lot of times where this wasn't a domination where it was sweep, 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 sweep. It was a lot of game sixes, a lot of, several game sevens. And, but whatever the motivation, like you said, he found whatever he needed for that game, and he took it over. Episode 6 goes into, I guess, him hating the fame, maybe, of always being in the center, never being able to get away, kind of starting to hate that, getting bored with it, I'd guess, getting tired with it, not having nothing to prove. He's got his titles. He's got his rings. The gambling comes up, and, several reporters have stated, everybody thinks, he's in a bad spot like John Daly, but I think Cowherd was the one that said at this point he's making $50,000 a minute. Gambling's not a problem. Even if it was $1 million to the pro, he's he only made this X amount of dollars, but he made 50 times that much on Nike plus McDonald's, Gatorade, and Hanes and whatever else. So gambling, and like he said, and I believe him, because there's a lot of people around here like us that want to have a little skin in the game. And like he said, whether it was playing $1 blackjack with Scott Burrell, he just wanted your money. he didn't care about whether it was only $1 or $5. He just wanted to win, and he wanted to win everybody's money. The same with golf, and Pippen alluded to this early, I think in episode 2, where the first thing that Jordan ever gave him was a set of golf clubs. And he thought it was a great gesture, but the only thing he wanted to do was get him on the golf course. So then he could turn around and take his money. So the gambling thing comes up, and me and you've talked about this for years and years about what our thoughts was on the gambling and whether he actually left basketball because of gambling. And I believe we got the answer we were waiting for. And I think it's put to bed with David Stern being stern, saying it had nothing to do with gambling.
It was put to bed. I'm not going to say 100%. I'm not going to say he was kicked out of the league or anything like that. I know that was a big conspiracy, and I'm not going to say 100% believe it. But I do believe still to this day that there was some sort of conversation between David Stern and Michael Jordan where Stern was just like, are you going to keep doing this? Like, this is a bad look if this is found out, if this is out in the public. I don't know if they wanted to reveal that for obvious reasons. And it could have been like a slight gesture, a very small conversation, but I feel like there was something because there was too much juice and heat around it. Now, one thing you kind of glossed over that we may be getting to anyway was the death of his father leading to him playing baseball. And I got to tell you, I had seen the documentary, the 30 for 30 on Jordan playing baseball. This really hit home the fact that I understood. He had won his championship. He was completely burned out. He put those last 2 championships on his back, especially that, 94, the 93, 94 one, where he literally put it on his back. He was doing all the endorsements, all the interviews, and he was wiped out. And his father passes away, and the one thing his father always wanted him to do was play baseball. His father genuinely thought he was going to be a big-time baseball player. And I can now understand that a little bit. I can understand because at that point, Rano, he had played, 6 years in the NBA, 6, 7 years? He was 31 years old playing baseball, which your power, you would be at the peak of your athletic ability. You would kind of figure out how to win and how to do different things. But him playing baseball makes a little bit going to be questions of why would you stop being the best in the world at what you do to do something else. I think there's always going to be that question for most sports fans when they talk about Jordan going to play baseball.
Well, yeah, I agree. And I think it was laid out, and whether we accept that answer or not, I think it was laid out well for us to accept. Also in that episode, they played the Suns in the finals.
Yeah.
So it's another motivation factor. Charles Barkley wins MVP. Jerry Krause says that Dan Marley is a really good defender. Worst thing you could say about another guy. And maybe Jerry Krause was smart. Maybe he knew to say Clyde Drexler was good. Maybe he knew to say Dan Marley was good. Because then, he goes out and he busts up Dan Marley, which I really like Dan Marley. And I love that. I like that Suns team with Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, and Charles Barkley. It was as close as you could get to beating those guys. I mean,
Kevin Johnson.
Yeah. So that they win that series, and then we go to episode 7, which is the continuing roasting of Scott Burrell. But I think if you've hung around guys a lot, there's always the one guy that takes the brunt of the jokes. But I don't think Burrell ever took it as, he even said, I wanted to fight Scott Burrell at times. I wanted him to fight me. I don't know what his deal was or what he saw about that guy that he didn't like. But he gave him a lot of junk, but it was mostly in a playful way, just talking junk. He called him names. But that's kind of things that guys do. You take the camera away, a guy calling him the B word or, whatever, it's not something that's offensive once you leave. It's not a racial or ethnicity kind of religion kind of thing, a personal thing. It's just things guys say to each other. So I think it was kind of overblown. And, through the 10 or 12 years, only one punch was thrown, and that was a retaliation to Kerr. So it wasn't like he was out beating guys. And he kind of prefaced it or maybe summed it up by saying, I never asked him to do anything I wouldn't do. It wasn't like he was a fat Mo Bond, sitting on a bucket while they ran, poles and, he was telling them what they needed to do. So I think it was a bad rap there. One guy I wanted to point out other than Burrell was Jed Bushler, who was a wig and pearls away from being a cross-dresser, in my opinion. That guy looks off to me. I don't know if he's an extreme fitness guy, but he used to be a pretty good sized guy. He looks like he looks a little off, and I'm surprised he got as much airtime as he did versus Horace Grant didn't get enough. I don't think.
I agree.
You never even, and B.J. Armstrong got a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Never saw, and I know these guys wasn't big time in there, but you rarely saw long way to the end. You didn't see any, and I know these guys wasn't big time, but you didn't see Craig Hodges, who was a 3-point champion. The other
no Dickie Simpkins. No Dickie.
But Dickie got 3 rings off the get. You didn't see Scott Williams and Jason Caffey and Cliff Levingston and guys who played through that, not even to mention. And I guess you had to just get all you could out of 6 or 8 guys. You didn't want to have 15 or 20 guys, and I get that. But it was just weird that guys that won multiple championships, like you said, Dickie Simpkins, I don't think had a memorable play in the whole run, but you saw his jersey when he's standing in the huddle on the sidelines every time. So, BJ got a lot.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is Michael Jordan didn't win without Dickie Simpkins. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's a good point.
Dickie for life.
So they went through
all
that.
Right, have we gotten to the Space Jam stuff yet?
It's coming. It's coming in episode 9. Let's see.
Okay.
This is where I was going to talk about the father's murder, the gambling, and into the baseball in 7. The father's murder, a lot of people talked about because of the gambling. It was some kind of mob hit thing. But, this isn't some guy who's stealing money out of parking meters to pay his tabs. He was never going to get hooked up.
It was 2 18-year-old kids.
Yeah.
It was 2 kids.
After the facts come out, you realize it could have been me, you, anybody else. But like I said, James Jordan was that guy who just got in his Lexus and said, I'm going to head up to Fayetteville this weekend and, put on the suit and nice shoes. And
going to Cherokee.
Yeah, it probably was. He was probably running a spade game. He was probably running a spade game at the country club. That's just the way it goes. So all that controversy, like you talked about, led to the baseball where he comes in at Double-A because of the money. Comes in at a Double-A, 13-game hitting streak. Some unprecedented stuff for a guy who hadn't swung a bat in 14 years.
Amazing.
So, he goes in, 13-game hitting streak, 30 stolen bases, 6'6". He got 6'6". It ain't a little guy like B.J. Armstrong who's motoring around. It's a guy who's big and rangy, probably the biggest guy in the whole whatever league that is in Double-A. And Terry Francona says he had enough raw talent that if he had got 1,500 swings, he could be a major leaguer.
Do you believe him? Do you believe that?
No.
I don't either.
I mean, as good as Tebow was an athlete, I knew. I mean, I said this from the get. He'll never make it. You can't just all of a sudden, you can all of a sudden be a football player because they can put a fat guy in a position to play a fat position or a fast guy to play a fast position. But you can't. You got to hit, run, catch, throw. And Jordan, 14 years, hadn't had the hand-eye coordination to hit a baseball. Yeah, right. Double-A, great. But you go hit Max Scherzer? Nah, you're not. I mean, you go hit Greg Maddux? You're not. No. You're not. It's a whole different level. But to look back, he's got all the money he needs. His family's set. Everything's good for generations. And it was a dream he wanted to do. Everybody wants – I mean, there's guys who are paying $30,000 to go play a round of golf with Tiger Woods or Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, So it's a dream that, everybody wants to do it. Guys are paying $15,000 to go to Florida to play in a grown-up spring training thing, a 40 and older baseball league. There's still guys around here that play softball 3 nights a week and think they're going to get called up to the Fireflies or something. So, I mean, it's what guys do, and for Jordan, he had the capability to buy a nice bus. They wasn't staying They wasn't staying in hotels with the doors on the outside. I can promise you that. They were staying the live PD hotels. They wasn't staying in none of them. You know, he's Ritz-Carlton, and they might have had to drive 30 more miles to Gastonia or somewhere, but they had continental breakfast everywhere they stayed when Jordan was there. So it was good for Terry Francona, and it was good for everybody on that team.
I can't add anything to that. Perfect.
Well, the last part of 7 was when Pippen sits out after he gets they draw up the shot for Kukoc.
Yes.
Pippen sits out. And like you talked about, you know, it's kind of like a stop. You know, Pippen was upward and then way down and then comes back and then and he shoots way off the radar right there. And for me, I mean, I wish Jordan would have been there or somebody would have been there because at that time Pippen's the king. You know, then nobody's gonna tell him anything. You know, Cartwright stands up and cries in the locker room, and then for Pippen to say something as stupid as I'd probably do it again today if I had a chance. That's it. No, nothing you could. I don't care about your back injury and all this other crap. I mean, you signed a bad contract. You sat out on your team. I'm done with the guy. I mean, is he 50 greatest? Yes. Is he one of the greatest? Probably. But for me, ever just saying that's my guy, never. At that point, if it wouldn't been so vital when Jordan come back to have him, I don't see how you don't get rid of him. I'm talking about trading for Derek Harper just to get rid of him.
You know, we are in the era of, you know, of course, social media, but from Kevin Durant to LeBron James, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green is guys that have been involved in these petty feuds, disputes, if you will, whether it be on Twitter, in the media. Can you imagine one of those guys? Does Scottie do what he does? Does he continue to sit out if Michael Jordan is still on that bench? I say no way. No way.
He wouldn't have been able to. Jordan would have manually taken him off that bench. I mean, that would be either that or he'd have got rid of him. I mean, it's no nonsense. You know, like I said, Bill Cartwright's a role player. Hodges a role player. Kukoc can't even probably say what he wants to say in English at that point. You know, you got Paxson 6'2". You know, you got a bunch of little guys and Dickie Simpkins, who Dickie Simpkins ain't ruffling no feathers. He just wants to hang out. Jason Caffey, Scott Williams. You got a bunch of role guys who are just, let me stay here. I'll stay here, and at least I'll have this legacy. You know, because, you know.
Yeah, Dickie was like the Charlie Whitehurst of the Chicago Bulls. He was just there, along for the ride.
Perfect. He's like Anthony Wright. Didn't take a snap. Got a couple of these on his finger. He's happy. All right, so it ends with that, and then, you know, at that point, we're in this whirlwind of Scottie Pippen because we've seen the greatest and then we've seen the worst, and you don't know where he's at. You know, he's, like I said, he's still 50, but he's got some bad marks on him. And you roll down to, I think LeBradford Smith is in that somewhere where, you know, he's a rookie out of Louisville. I think he's playing with the Nets. He says, "Good game, Mike," after Mike shoots like 9 for 27 that night or whatever. Then they play I think it was a Wizards. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they play a home and home.
It was back to back.
Yeah, back to back. Home and home, and they go back. And then he ends up scoring like 36 in the first half on that kid. Another one of those minute motivational points. Yeah. You know, he said, "I just said good game," and obviously in sarcasm because I don't think they scored but like 80 points that night total. But it's just another one of those examples of it don't take but this one little thing. And then he probably couldn't sleep that night thinking how he was going to roast LeBradford Smith the next night. But 36 points in the first half is phenomenal.
It just adds to the legend. It just adds to the legend of MJ.
Well, and then episode 8 starts out, B.J. Armstrong's in Charlotte. You know, B.J. Armstrong's been part of those 3 titles or whatever, you know, that run. And then, you know, they go up and now B.J. wants to talk trash, thinking they got the upper hand. That Charlotte team was pretty solid, pretty formidable playoff team. And then next thing you know, B.J. Armstrong gets crucified the rest of the series. But the thing is, what you were
Do you remember that series?
No.
Do you remember that series?
No,
I don't either.
I don't remember. I mean, man, I'm to the point now. I don't remember the last time I ate a Look Up House of Pizza. So I mean, my memory ain't as good as it once was. I used to memorize.
Well, I was talking to like I was talking to some Charlotte Hornets fans. There's not that many around here, but I am in Rock Hill. And they seem to remember it very fondly. And I'm thinking, I guess because you had Larry Johnson and Muggsy Bogues and all those guys. But yeah, they kind of made B.J. Armstrong as like a pivotal part of the story.
I remember the team. I just don't remember individual because I mean, I don't know. I don't know what was going on at that point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, shortly after that, he's filming Space Jam, and he's doing that 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and then he's having these pickup games. This is the off season after all that. But could you imagine some of the pickup games?
We got to talk about this.
Okay.
This fascinates me. So I'm a big fan of Bill Simmons.
Right.
He's columnist and has a lot of podcasts, and he's obsessed. And he made some messages, and he said, hey, how much of that footage was not used from this Shirts and Skins games Jordan had that arena made just for him so he could work out in his off time.
Right.
While he was making Space Jam. Which, by the way, people don't realize how talented Jordan was. I mean, not a great actor. It was his only movie. But he's literally talking to people in costumes a bit behind a green screen. Like, that's amazing. But Bill Simmons asked if there was any footage that was not used in the documentary of the Shirts and Skins games, because you had all these stars. I mean, you had a young, massive Juwan Howard. You had Charles Barkley. You had all the guys that were in Space Jam.
Right.
Muggsy Bogues was there. David Robinson was there.
Reggie Miller.
And Reggie Miller. Bill Simmons found out that all of the footage that they had of those pickup games were in the documentary. So that's all that they had. But you said it. Can you imagine those games? Like, the greatness on the floor. And you're going to play a lot different in a street ball game than you are in an organized basketball game, organized NBA game, right? I'm curious, who's that guy that calls their own fouls? Who's going to be that guy? Is it Reggie?
I don't know. But could you imagine? I just want the audio. I just want him mic'd up. Because if he's that way to his teammates, could you imagine what he would be to a young Juwan Howard, after he dunks on him, or any Patrick Ewing or any of these guys where they're probably not fouling a lot, so there probably are some crazy dunks, and there, then again there are some great defensive plays, alley-oops and stuff. But yeah, like you said, it shows that get up in the morning, workout, 12 hours of filming or 10 to 12 hours of filming, then working out and then playing pickup games to 10 o'clock at night. And like they said, when he came back that next year, he was ready to go. He was finally in basketball shape again, because his trainer had said, you're working a different group of muscles to be a baseball player. Your basketball is going to be shot. So, he came back for the playoffs, and then he had to reset his whole body. But that's what he did, a 16-hour day every day, and build an arena just to have pickup games. I mean, how do you call in guys, hey, man, fly in this week. We're going to play 5 games at 7 o'clock. That had to be pretty amazing. And like we talked about the punching Steve Kerr, but then gained a lot of respect. Season or episode 8 was a lot of talking about that. We get to 9, and then Reggie Miller is, I guess, the focal point of most of this, or a lot of this in the early going about, how clutch he was. He was a young guy. He was hot. And, he put it on Jordan in a couple of those games in that series. I mean, he'd come off screens. Jordan couldn't keep up with him. Jordan, of course, playing both ends of the court. But Reggie Miller had some games in that series. And then hit that game-winning three-pointer as well.
It wasn't just Reggie Miller, though, Rhino. It was that Pacers team. And I think I wasn't really talking about the documentary. I think Jordan may have alluded to it, that was one of the better teams they faced in their entire era, their entire decade of dominance.
Right.
You had Chris Mullin. You had big old Rick Smits. You had Jalen Rose, a young Jalen Rose.
Both
Then you had Mark
Davises,
Jackson, I guess, on the back end.
right?
Yeah, both the Davis brothers, Davis boys. Yeah. So yeah, that was a really formidable team, and seeing Reggie in his prime with the stroke that he had, God, he was so fun to watch. Just that brought me back because I there's some guys you kind of forget watching. Reggie was one of those guys that I remember watching, but gosh, he was so good.
Well, the thing too, though, the only negative I got against Reggie is he's a one trick pony. He'd have 26, but he'd have 2 rebounds, 2 assists. His stat line was always shooting. He never was close to a triple double. He never rebounded. Of course, his sister was built better than he was as far as width.
Is he basically Klay Thompson like today? Is that what he basically is?
I guess, but Klay will come off the ball. Klay, does stop and shoot a lot. He had 60 points and only touched the ball 90 seconds. But I think at least Klay can go to the hole if he wants to. Reggie, unless it was a fast break, really stayed out. He didn't, I don't know what the stats say, but I would bet money that Klay's rebounds and assists are a little bit higher than Reggie Miller. But yeah, that's probably a fair comparison.
Yeah.
And Ray Allen did a lot of the same. Ray Allen did a lot of shooting. He'd find his spot and he'd shoot. Reggie Miller was probably a more flamboyant and better Kyle Korver. I know nobody put those two names together.
I always thought Tayshaun Prince was a poor man's Reggie Miller too.
Tayshaun Prince had a wingspan, man. It was amazing. It was amazing how long his arms
did,
are.
but he would also just sit in the corner and wait for the ball though too. he did that a lot.
Byron Russell gets brought up in this one, saying, telling Jordan it's a good thing he retired because, he was going to roast him if he got a chance. And 2 years later, he gets his chance. And that's where Jordan gets another motivational take on Russell. And matter of fact, the final shot of this thing is Russell sliding by, push, no push, momentum, gravity, whatever, and then making that shot that ends the whole dance. But Russell was one of the 5 or 6 guys who gets intentionally roasted personally on this thing.
Yeah. And that was interesting too with the Jazz. It was the one team, the one series out of all the series they played and documented and talked about where the stars really weren't the focus. When they played the Pacers, it was about Reggie. When they played Isaiah, of course. But when they played the Jazz, it wasn't about Malone and Stockton. It was about Russell. It was Jordan against Russell, and Russell making the comments that he did. And by the way, who took more L's in this documentary, Scott Burrell or Russell?
Scott Burrell, I think, because he's in like 6 episodes. You get called a bitch and a hoe. You get called a hoe just because. He just shows up at practice and he just throws him down. And so I think Burrell took the most body blows of anybody in the game on these 10 episodes.
All right, we got to talk about your boy Rodman. Finals practice, flies off to Nitro, hits DDP with a chair, comes back, hits a couple of late game free throws to help clinch the series. He does get the fine, but who cares? And oh, by the way, he goes home with Carmen Electra, who wins.
We didn't talk about this back in the Rodman thing where he says, Phil, I need some time off.
Goes to Vegas.
Of course, everybody's like, no, dude. If we start doing that, Jordan has his back, middle of the season, let him go. Just 48 hours. Well, then like 90 hours later, there's no Rodman. Hey, could you imagine Jordan walking through, let's say, the Bellagio, kicking in doors, and he finds this guy over here with Carmen Electra and who knows what else was going on and snatches him up and says it's time to get back to work. But like you said on that, night before the finals, game 4, I think, he's got a plane waiting on him. It's already been set up with Eric Bischoff, I guess, and Hulk Hogan comes out smoking cigar, national TV, misses practice, makes $200,000 from WCW, gets fined $20,000 from the Bulls. $180,000 gain plus, at this time he's becoming a more and more of a figure. He's becoming a marketable character, way more than just a basketball player. So,
and for those that don't know, Rhino, later that year, I don't know if you know this, later that year in July, I guess it was like a month later, right? NBA Finals are in June. A month later, Rodman and Malone are in the main event at Bash at the Beach, and it's the largest buy rate that WCW had ever had, and it's fresh off the highest rated finals to that point, the Jazz and Bulls, and I think it got like a 34, which is like 90 million people, something crazy like that.
You could tell. So, Hogan alluded to that night how he was roughing up Malone, and you could tell that was in the works. That's what made me think of it. He just went ahead and put that forward, which is a good script writer for sure. One thing we missed in 9, still the biggest unknown and probably the only really, really blaring unknown part is the pizza. So now, 10 o'clock at night, Jordan's hungry, calls up a random pizza joint, nothing's open. 5 guys show up at the motel to bring this pizza. Jordan says, I ate the whole pizza all by myself. Next thing you know, he's got food poisoning 3 o'clock in the morning. He's vomiting, diarrhea, whatever. And then he shows up at the game and he's out of it. So I know there's a lot of thoughts and what possibly happened. What's your take on the pizza story?
Let me break this down. This is my new favorite conspiracy. He could have had food poisoning, but if he eats it at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., shouldn't that be out of his system by like 8 o'clock later that day? Like 8 o'clock at night later that day? That's number one. Number two, why was he up that late the day? Why were all those dudes still in his room? I mean, he was drinking. He was partying, let's be honest. And also, why were there 5 guys apparently ordering a pizza at 3 a.m.?
I thought it was 10 a.m. I thought it was 10 p.m.
No. It was after midnight.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, regardless, it was 10 p.m. Let's just say it was 10 p.m. and let's say he was vomiting and all that stuff at 2 a.m. I mean, you've had food poisoning.
I don't know what happened. I lost you there, Tyler. I don't know. All right. I don't know what happened right there.
Still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Anyway.
I don't either.
So you're saying I've had food poisoning at 10:30, then what?
Then wouldn't it be out of your system the next day by like 7 o'clock at night?
I don't know. Wasn't a hangover? Also,
it could have been a hangover.
But wouldn't a hangover be out of your system with enough Pedialyte?
That's possible too.
I don't know. I mean, they tell the story, and he's got a lot of guys to corroborate that. I mean, I don't.
But how is it called? No, hold on though. How is it called the flu game for 20 years? That's what I want to know. Why didn't somebody just come out and say, "No, man, he ordered a pizza and got food poisoning"? Like it was the flu game for 20 years.
I don't know.
I don't know. There's something to that story that's not right.
There probably is something to that story. I don't know what caused that or why why they would want to hide that. Then again, I mean, if he had went partying, it wasn't something that he wouldn't normally do. I mean, he'd roll up to Atlantic City when they was playing New York. So I mean, he wasn't Steve Kerr. He didn't have an image to uphold, and Rodman's already taken 96-hour trip to Las Vegas partying, and so I don't know. It's interesting. I'm sure now that the ball is rolling, you're going to get people that were involved in that. The pizza joint, B, somebody who knew the cousin or the nephew of the security guard who actually told him what happened. Social media will bring it to light about what actually happened in the next few days. All right, we get towards the end. 9 and 10 are kind of together. We get the Steve Kerr story, which could be a 30 for 30 in its own right, I guess.
Yeah.
You talk about the gym rat, the undersized white kid who just wanted to play basketball. His dad was a diplomat, a professor in Beirut. Before he gets over there, the president of the university gets kidnapped. He takes over. He gets shot in the head. And this may be why we didn't know what the backstory was, but Kerr's kind of outspoken on democracy and a lot of worldly matters and politics and stuff. So you didn't know why. You just thought he was a guy just shooting his mouth off possibly, but he's got some background in this, a lot of probably history and a lot of knowledge of especially what goes on in the Middle East. I think that was a pretty good story. That could have been a 30-minute on E60 episode right there, or maybe even a 30 for 30 if you did him and Jordan's dad and what it meant to both of them. That slowed everything down right there and brought it back into real life, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I thought it was brilliant how they sculpted it to where after he tells that story, oh, by the way, Kerr hits the big shot in Game 7 against the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then now we're on to the last dance. Now we're on to that 98 season against the Jazz. I just thought it was a brilliant way to kind of cap off one of those story arcs where they were building of all the championship season getting to the last dance. I just thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see any fault in there at all. I think it was perfectly done. Stuff I wouldn't even have thought of and stuff we didn't even know about. I don't think anybody knew Kerr's dad was what he was. So now we go into this, a tough game against Utah. Pippen hurts his back. He keeps going back and forth, pretty much like how you charge your phone just to get enough to send a text message. He got just enough heat on his back just to come out and give 5 more minutes and 10 more minutes and just enough to make a play. And he was pretty much a decoy, even though he scored, I think, 7 points or something in that game. But it was, I guess, a redeeming quality. I guess at the end, after all this up and down, you finally get the redeeming quality of, and his teammates had his back on that and said, they're in the tougher guy, whatever. I don't know if that's true. You'd say that about, we see that every day when people die around here. You say that was a good old guy, even though they weren't worth a damn. So you never know how that goes as far as what they really think about Pippen. But so, I mean, they win, and then you don't know what's going to happen next. At that point, you assume But then we go into talking about possibly the possibilities of 7. I'm not sure they could win the next one. I don't think they could beat the Spurs team. You talk about Reinsdorf's going to override Krause, re-sign Phil, MJ's going to re-sign, Pippen's going to re-sign Rodman and Kerr. I don't know if Rodman's there. You don't know what Rodman's doing. You don't know what's going on. Not to say he couldn't still play. It's just you just never know. Kerr, I mean, he made some big shots, but he's not a focal point 82-game season. Pippen's already pissed off for the last 7 years that he ain't got no more money. He's got a chance to finally go somewhere and get paid. And with Jordan making $30 million, Phil probably making $7, $8, $9 million, signing Rodman to a 1-year deal for 10, 12, 15 million, the cap wasn't what it is now. And then Pippen not being able to get that number one money because he still would probably get half of what he would have got on the open market simply because you got to pay those other guys, Jordan and Rodman. So I just don't think – I'm not saying he couldn't do it or figure it out or make a hell of a trade for another guy. But I don't think that team – I think that team was like a tire that was just about ready to blow, and you got all you could out of it this time to party.
So a couple things. You nailed it. I'm not going to say they 100% couldn't. But remember, 99 was the lockout season, was like 50 games.
Right.
So I don't know if that benefits the older teams because they can rest a little more. It might actually benefit the younger guys. I'm not sure how that would play out, but that is a factor you have to put in here. But if, let's just say it's the Bulls and the Spurs, Rodman was on the back end. There's no telling. He might have just retired. Okay. Who's going to guard Tim Duncan? Who's going to be the body that's on Tim Duncan? Who's going to guard David Robinson on that Bulls team that we just saw barely get by the Jazz there in Game 6? Because there's no telling if that goes into Game 7. The Bulls were hanging on by a thread. You might not have had a Scottie Pippen in Game 7. Think about that.
Right.
They very well could have lost Game 7 if it got to that point, if Jordan doesn't have that amazing sequence, which we didn't even talk about. The last memory that Bulls fans have of Jordan, that we all have of Jordan with the Chicago Bulls and that legacy, stealing the ball from Malone, going down court, and it was not a push-off, by the way, and hitting the shot. I mean, it was the great back angle where Russell just got lost. I mean, he just shuffled his feet and his momentum carried him.
Well, he always said if you gave him the shoulder fake, his head would follow. He played on the front of his feet. He knew exactly what he needed to do, and he made the exact move to get his head going forward. He got out the way and made the shot.
And was 99 the first year with Shaq and Kobe, or was that 2000 in terms of them pairing together? I can't remember. But that would have been a force they would have had to deal with. Regardless, I just don't think the Bulls would have had enough. I think Jordan would have taken a pay cut. I think there would have been some other guys that would have taken a pay cut to allow Pippen to finally get that contract. I'm okay with all of that theory. I'm fine with that. But I'm with you. Once they get to the Spurs in 99, you've got peak David Robinson. You've got Tim Duncan figuring it out. And I don't see them beating that team. There's just too much to us.
It's the perfect ending. I mean, it ended perfectly. You don't want to go through and struggle and nagging injuries. And, you know, if Rodman decides he doesn't want to be there, or Pippen does take the money grab. If Jordan comes back without Pippen, Kukoc isn't that 2. He's a 3 or a 4, but he's not that 2. Yeah. And then you lose. You know, fortunately, they left the whole Wizards debacle out of the thing, which is fine, which is they should have. But I'm saying that's what it would have been like, a team struggling probably to make the playoffs or maybe a below 500 seed, and you lose in the playoffs, and you don't want to go off like that. They went out at the peak just like Elway did, you know, win a championship, walk off the field, and there was no better ending to that story than that, with or without the Wizards or owning the Hornets.
Is there anything that you wanted to see but didn't out of this?
I would really like to have seen some of the high stakes golf. You know, supposedly he played golf with Phil Ivey. He's played with a lot of guys who throw it around. I would like just curiosity. What is a hole worth? Is that 1,000, 10,000? And how do you pay? You know, does Jordan go out to the Porsche and get a bag full of $100,000 and hand it off, or they wire the money? I don't know how that works, but I would have liked to seen some of that. And even the blackjack, you know, or whatever he played in the casinos. I would have liked to seen him shuffling money the way he did.
Yeah, they didn't have Venmo or Cash App in 1997, did they?
No. And it's interesting, they kept the kids off of there, and the producer said he didn't really want a lot of the kids. You know, the kids said their thing at the end, and I was all right with that. They didn't interview his ex-wife, and that's okay too.
I've heard that today. There's been a lot of reaction today. There's been a lot of Monday morning quarterback, even on a Tuesday. And we're going to be talking about this documentary for a long time, especially if we're still in quarantine and the way things are for the next couple of weeks, but or at least until this next slew of documentaries come out with Lance and the Summer '98. But I was okay with the family not being involved because, no offense to them, it didn't add to the story. What would it have added to the story, if at all? This was about the last dance. This was about the final season of Jordan. This was about all of those characters on that team. This was about everyone in the front office with Jerry Krause and Reinsdorf. This was about the rise of Jordan. It wasn't a fall of Jordan because, again, he still had those Wizards years. And, God, there could be a whole other 30 for 30 documentary on his ownage of the Bobcats, now Hornets. That's a whole other bag of worms there. But no, I didn't think the kids were crucial to the story at all.
All right, so we give it a 10 out of 10. It's perfect. Couldn't have been done better. Now you looking at it, your basketball ranking, where do you go now from where you had Jordan before this? Because I mean, like you said, you kind of grew up where Kobe was your first superstar, as far as your age. Jordan was there, but Kobe was your first face of the NBA probably.
Yeah.
You was real small when Jordan was doing what he did. So now when you pull up your rankings, who's your top 5 guys now, and is it changed from 2 months ago?
In my lifetime, in my era, I mean, even when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, during the latter part of the Bulls dynasty, Jordan was still my guy, or not my guy. He was the guy, I should say. Kobe then became my guy. And I don't know if I would ever have said Kobe was number one all time, but in my lifetime, it is Jordan. And not just because of that documentary, not just because of what we witnessed and what we saw on the court, but it's what he meant to the game, Rano. It's the Nike, it's the endorsements, basketball was dying. Basketball, like late 80s, the Celtics were done their run. The Pistons, yeah, they were the bad boys, but it wasn't a fun brand of basketball. And if you think about it, if Jordan doesn't rise up and win all these championships, who is? Who are like the big stars? Is it Patrick Ewing and the Knicks? Maybe, I guess. The
Rockets.
Jazz were, yeah, the Rockets maybe. The Jazz weren't fun to watch in the late 90s. They weren't. I mean, it was Stockton Malone and a bunch
that
of
Suns team. That Suns team is marketable with
yeah,
Barkley,
for like
Marley, and
2 years.
KJ.
Yeah, for sure. But I think what he meant to the game more than anything with the endorsements and everything outside the game, and then now seeing this documentary, his competitive nature. And I've always said the players playing today are the sons of Kobe, whereas the players playing in the early 2000s from LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Kobe Bryant, those were the sons of Jordan. And Jordan, I think, will leave a much bigger legacy for what he meant to the game and what he did on the court than anyone ever will. And I'll always think about it. And I don't think you can argue that for what he did in 6 championships and however many years he played. What he meant to the game was just it cannot be described. It cannot be explained.
Give me your top 5.
Oh my God!
I mean, not favorite, the best. If you put them down and you got your Mount Rushmore, just give me your 4. Your Mount Rushmore from the day you're born up. I'm not talking about Wes Unseld and Oscar Robinson. I'm talking about Jordan era up.
I can't say Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain because I never saw.
Me neither.
They can't do that.
Right.
So I'll go Jordan. I'll go Kobe. I'll go Duncan. I'll go LeBron.
And like I said, it doesn't have to ever be a LeBron argument, which everybody makes it that narrative. We don't do it in any other sport. We don't compare Griffey and Hank Aaron to Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle, and we don't compare Peyton and Tom Brady to Young and Montana. And I don't know why we just can't say both those guys are great.
I'm doing the rhino finger. I got my hand up. I'm doing the rhino finger.
Go ahead.
Let me say this. All these LeBron haters, if LeBron was playing in the 80s or 90s, he would still kick ass. He would still be dominant. LeBron plays the game today the way the game is called. Yes, he's going to ask for the extra foul. Yes, he's going to plead his case because that's the way the game is called. But if he was playing in the 90s, think about his physical stature and how much bigger he is than anybody playing his position. He would have been awesome in the 80s and 90s. There is no doubt about that.
And the biggest common denominator, I think, and I'm going to end it right here because I don't want to – we could talk about LeBron for another hour. You give him a guy like Phil Jackson, not the 6 or 8 coaches he's had over this 15 years. Give him one guy you trust, Phil Jackson, and give him a Robin to his Batman. Not Drew Gooden, not Smush Parker, not J.R. Smith, not Tristan Thompson. You give him a guy who is formidable enough to go to the Eastern Conference Finals without him for an extended period of time. Kyrie, a healthy Kyrie, may have been that guy where they could have done some damage, but they only had a couple years with him. Of course, with Bosh and Wade.
And he didn't trust Kyrie.
But in Cleveland, not Brendan Haywood, not Ilgauskas. You give him a solid number 2, a Paul George, I don't know, whoever, and a solid guy.
Birdman.
No, I don't know about Birdman, but not Mario Chalmers. And you give him a guy like Horace Grant that he can depend on down low to give him 10 and 10, and I think you see a lot more parallel than getting pounded what they did. All right, Tyler, that was good. We went about an hour and a half, but appreciate you dropping in. We'll get together once sports gets back going. We'll talk to you.